Good morning. Sitting here on a Saturday morning, do I look tired? A few worries on my mind, but we push forward. And I've just finished drinking a pot of tea, loose leaf tea, which I really enjoy. Can't beat the flavour. And just finishing up a pint of water before I will shortly begin the morning regime. And sitting here, and what I thought was a fly came in through the window. And you know how they can't get out again because they get confused by the net curtains. So I pick up the air freshener and bugger off. But that's not going to last long. It's buzzing around my face. Then I realise it's a wasp. And I'm like, a peculiar thought comes to mind. Anyway, I grab hold of a cup and an envelope and I trap it on the wall with the cup and slide the envelope underneath and then let it out the window. Sit back down and think to myself, this is like alien abduction reversed, isn't it? And before I talk about the whole alien abduction, fairies and UFOs and all that stuff, I want to make a kind of caveat here that I do not spend my days obsessing over this subject, although I did see a UFO when I was very young boy, in the garden, and I'll relay that memory shortly in this little video here. But yeah, I thought this is like alien abduction reversed, isn't it? And there's definitely something going on with that subject, but a lot of crazy motherfuckers, You see, everything is oversaturated. I mean, the internet is wonderful, but whatever you're into, it kind of gets ruined by a kind of cacophony of neediness and attention seeking in order to, satisfy either an emotional or a financial need. There was something to be said about the old days when if you were into something, you just bought a book and took it home, and you might write a letter, you might join a group, you might make a phone call, but it was simple, right? There was a peace in that. Wouldn't want to go back to it, but there is an oversaturation now, and it becomes just like a headache sometimes. That's why I like just working through initiation into Hermetics, and there's a reading list, etc. Obviously there's always going to be something else here and there that one gets into, but there is only one core concern when it comes to practice, if you like. And anyway, so this wasp thing, it's like how many insects live and die without ever coming into contact with a human being? Billions of them. But every now and then one of them will wander into our territory, or we will wander into their territory. Like when we lift up a stone, or like when, what happened to me today, a wasp just flies in through the window. So imagine it from the point of view of the wasp, although you can't, but this is a good analogy for not having even the mental capacity to understand what is going on. First of all, it's assaulted by a burst of liquid, and then a piece of technology is implemented. A vessel envelopes it. It becomes abducted by the teacup. Then it's trapped by a kind of pulpy membrane of the envelope. So it's it's been abducted, it's been caught, trapped, and then it is, it travels to the window in my hands, this ineffable godlike being to the wasp, in one sense. In another sense, just something beyond its ken. Whereupon it is released to the outdoors. So then it wanders off with a kind of traumatic memory, perhaps, or probably not, but just use the analogy. It cannot understand what happened to it any more than these people that report UFO experiences. I mean, this analogy that, fairy lore and all that kind of thing, I don't want to go into this too deeply because anyone watching this will know what I mean. I hate having to repeat stuff that we've all already come across, UFO lore relates perfectly to fairy lore, missing time, strange marks, being taken somewhere, little beings, all that kind of stuff. But obviously the analogy is kind of reversed in the case of the wasp because, we are big. But all of these characteristics of the whole alien abduction phenomenon are all there in the fairy lore going back, hundreds of years. And so a bit like with magic, where it's like you can't have all those people banging on about something for thousands of years, investing their time, their consciousness, different people in different places coming up with the same ideas if there's nothing to it. There obviously is something to it. There is an experience that is being interpreted from our point of view in a kind of, space age way. Back in the day, it would have been, spiritual creatures. Truth is, they probably are some kind of interdimensional experience or intelligence, or who knows. It's just reminds me, actually, I took Salvia Divinorum over a few days a few years ago, and it was littered with the alien, and it related perfectly to the plant aspect in some mysterious way. I got that off of Manly P. Hall. I say that a lot. In some mysterious way. And I remember I had visions of like vines sort of swinging, in an alien breeze on an alien planet, just almost breathing like lungs, but they were intelligent and they were red as well, like just these vines swinging in an alien jungle. I saw a spaceship, but there were vines, like plant vines inside the spaceship. All kinds of weird stuff, but what relates to right now is seeing one of these greys, these diminutive beings in front of a UFO. And again, the explicit knowing was you could not possibly understand. So, similar thing with the wasp, right? It could not possibly understand. It doesn't have the capacity to understand what this is the thing, the mind, it does, it tries to make interpretations, like when you see a face in a rock, or the mind is constantly interpreting things, from the information that it has subconsciously, and we're not always fully aware that is happening. So it's a modern day interpretation, isn't it? The whole little spacemen thing, very likely. It's interesting how they show up in terms of the ayahuasca experience as well. I've had a little bit of that on ayahuasca as well, a little bit of the alien creeping in. And so I think it was around the early 90s that the UFO thing really kicked off, that whole, with the X-Files and all those programs on TV, Roswell, all that bullshit. And then all this cast of characters, which are still going, a lot of them making, their trade with books, and, Bob Lazar and Whitley Strieber and God knows who else, And it's funny, isn't it, that recently this whole, information that has been released to the public in terms of studying UFO, it doesn't make any fucking difference to anyone. Oh, but in the same way that even though coronavirus is bullshit, in the way that you could not have imagined that we'd all be walking around in masks, because we fucking well have to, there could be a shift one day whereby we're suddenly aware, or we suddenly have knowledge that is probably, kept from us for a long time, will suddenly be released. Yep. We have evidence of alien beings, intelligent alien beings, and we'll all be walking around like, whoa, everything has changed. But it will, in the same way with the discovery of the Americas, it's mind-blowing, but sooner or later it will kind of normalize, because the human being is always wanting, is never satisfied, and anything new and exciting always becomes grey after a little while, when you're living in normal consciousness days, right? So early 90s, the whole UFO craze, and I remember I read Communion, and I was living at the time, there are strange parallels to now actually, but not entirely the same. I was about 19. I was really overweight then for a couple of years actually. My weight's gone up and down over the years, and my hair has gone from long to bald over the years, So I remember having long hair, long blonde hair, and I was living in a little room. I was doing a cleaning job. It's depressed out of my mind because I was a singer in a band, the first band that I joined, thrash metal, heavy metal, extreme metal band. And I was having it was a great moment. It was like suddenly I was doing what I wanted to do. I was being creative and being the center of attention as well. It was fantastic up there on stage, everything, Very shy at the time, so it was very strange, just fronting a band, but inside being deeply shy and with an aversion towards interaction, I guess, So I was doing a lot of art. See, there are lots of parallels to this time, but not the same. I was doing a lot of art, and I was, busy working away on this massive piece of art on the wall. And I was incorporating these images from, like UFO stuff, and, a little bit of the whole kind of Chariots of the Gods, because obviously, back then as a teenager, I was 19 at the time, you were going to find these books and they were going to have some kind of an impact, but I guess they were always a little bit strange and unreal. But as soon as I discovered Graham Hancock, that's when I believe I started seeing things, more clearly in terms of, that kind of thing. Graham Hancock, Robert Bevell, Anyway, so everyone's obsessed with aliens. And in the same way we have the oversaturation with the, with anything, alien greys painted green with joints in their mouths and, on posters and, just a joke, just bullshit, So we're like those insects. Something happens to us we can't explain, we can only interpret, and it's rare. And we interpret that through what we can know at the current stage that, humanity or our culture finds itself at. And the popularity, it goes up and down. It's like, you know, when it first bursts out into the culture, it has its 5 minutes of fame, and then it settles down. Like, everyone knows the archetypal alien grey and the abduction lore and all that kind of thing now. So let's bring this back to being, how old would I have been? Between 6 and 8 years old, probably about 8 years old, I think. I was in the garden, and I remember my dad looking up at the sky, and his words were something like, "Fuck me, it's a UFO, innit? Look, up there, look, look." He ran in to grab the binoculars, because we had, like, my granddad's on my mum's side, you know, her dad, binoculars left over, which I used to use for my bird watching. I was a bird watcher. I used to belong to the YOC, the Young Ornithologists Club. I had a lovely badge on my shoulder and everything. I loved it. And anyway, so he ran to grab the binoculars, which were just on the dining room table, just inside the patio doors, and he pointed up at the sky. He looked through the binoculars first, and he pointed up at the sky, handed me the binoculars, and what was just a little kind of black pinprick moving around under the clouds, I could see very clearly, was a silver disc. And it did seem to have the impression of being that classic saucer shape, but severely massive. Because if it looked like it was just under the clouds. So trying to imagine how big this thing would have been, it would have been like a, you know, a sizable craft. Actually, I wouldn't even want to guess. And, you know, memories are tricky and all that, but see, the thing is, I remember we had one book in the house, UFOs. My granddad, who'd passed away, had a little bit of a fascination with UFOs before they became, you know, popular. So he had some of those lovely sort of 70s, 80s books with, you know, full of pictures that as a kid would kind of scare you and intrigue you, you know, just strange beings with cat-like eyes, you know, emerging from a craft. It's like, you know, these sort of 50s artwork, you know, of a man and woman, like, you know, really fast. I remember staring, you know, going through that book and reading it and understanding half of it and picking up a general impression. So this is what I'm saying. I think, like, I don't know, maybe that had something to do with it, you know, if it's a psychological interdimensional type thing, maybe just having that book in the house, that one book in particular, maybe that had an influence, or maybe not. I don't know. I remember there was another book on just weird phenomena in general, where there was a picture of this guy. He looked like a kind of sort of acid head of the 70s, with a beard and long hair and a kind of black robe, and, you know, I was just about to say a strange silver, you know, array of necklaces, and then I realised that I have the same now. And he was like, there was this writing like, "I have been to another world, listen to my story, or I will tell my story." And I remember saying to my dad, "This guy says he's been abducted with aliens, taken off to a different planet, and this is amazing." And I remember my dad saying, "People say a lot of things." So that's one of my first memories of kind of a notion of people are full of shit, you know. But anyway, saw this silver disc, and it was moving. Again, this brings us back to the wasp thing, right? It was moving erratically, so it would sort of be there, and then it would sort of be there, and then, but it was always just sort of shaking, but sort of darting to different sort of areas close by. And then as I was looking at it through the binoculars, I could see the sun glinting off the silver and everything, and it just disappeared. Just instantly disappeared. Now, did it go super fast? Did it go into a different dimension? Probably, you know. The only reason I had any understanding of what it might possibly be was because of that book. And How can you forget something like that? You can't. So that's why when the early 90s rolled around and everyone was going through the UFO craze, I immediately accessed that memory. Like, fuck yeah, these things are real. I saw one. And then for a long time after that, I was thinking, well, why have I seen a UFO? Like me, who's, you know, the artistic, spiritual guy, all of those stereotypes, right? You know, how is it that I've experienced a ghost? I've experienced out-of-body experiences. I've experienced the... See, when you start to tell people that you're close to, that you trust, some of these experiences, it seems too much. Like, why is it all happening to you? See, this is another part of the mystery. It's like, it does choose you when the other chooses you. It opens you up